Welcome to Trains Are Cool Part 2. My name's Jeff. I'll be your narrator. We visit the Flat Rock Model Train Depot and Museum in Flat Rock, Michigan. We take a ride on the Southshore Line's Electroliner from Michigan City, Indiana to Millennium Station in Chicago. Matt Kipler wanted to add another 4x8 layout to his basement, but he didn't have the room, so he came up with an excellent idea. Bob Phillips takes time off from his You Can Do It series to explain what makes a toy train engine rumble down the track, and we'll learn about freight trains. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started.
Hi, I'm Pat Simic, and my husband and I are co-founders of the Flat Rock Train Depot here in Flat Rock, Michigan. The story begins in 1941 when a little poor boy from Waltz was born, and he was very interested in trains. So by the time he was 8 or 9 years old, he had received a few trains, American Flyers, from his aunts and uncles. As he grew up, he became still interested in trains, and he decided he would like to have a model train layout. And then we found this building and we began the train layout. We were just interested in having the most unique layout that we could have, that this depot would be a family activity center. People from babies to people in their 90s could come and they could enjoy this together. My husband was interested in the trains and the mechanical part of trains, and I felt that the trains would be much better displayed if we had scenery and dioramas, materials in addition to the trains.
Hello, I'm Steve Heverin, a member of this fine club, and it's been quite a joy. I like a lot of detail, so I met with some people on a tour one time, and they said, well, when you build a train layout, put a lot of scenery in it, a lot of detail, so when you come in and look at the layout, you see the layout, you don't see the trains. The trains are secondary, but they make it come alive.
My name is Jim Sissung, and I probably came around here about the same time Steve Heverin did, and that's how we got to know each other. And my forte in this place is to be the engineer. I run 14 trains all at once. I have to keep looking from side to side to side to see if something has fallen off the track. So that's kind of what I do. And I'm also the American Flyer mechanic on the old stuff, not the new stuff. That's lost me.
The layout, it is 17 by 34. We do a mixed bag of American Flyer and Lionel, and we mixed it that way. Obviously the beginning was with Leon because he was American Flyer. And when I came down here, I was being a Lionel guy. He and I were going back and forth. It's like Ford and Chevrolet. I said, you know, put more Lionel in there and get this American Flyer stuff out. But we've always had a good time with it. It's a mixed bag of track. We've got the regular tubular Lionel, which has been around for a long time. We've used the sectional American Flyer track, and in some cases, if you look out there, we use the rubber road bed underneath that. Then we've used some actually scale S-gauge, which is a flexible track that looks with many, many ties, but that we can run the American Flyer on that. And that's pretty much what we're doing right now. We have thoughts of getting some of the new fast track. We use it over here on the small layout. We're using just about everything that's out there on the market right now. And we did use Gargraves, which is flexible track that you bend the way you want it. That's what we're running the log train on. And so you saw a little bit of everything running. The new Polar Express on the main line. And we've got some of the new Lionel American Flyer freight set we had running, which runs very nicely. So there's a mixed bag of that. And then of course around the top, those are both O-gauge Lionel running up on the top. The main mountain is, I call it the economy mountain. It's all done with paper and then just painted. So there's no styrofoam or anything in the main portion of the mountain. And just made it a quick way to do it, and then throw the paint, and it's a nice way to do it. The highway, one of our gentlemen joined here in the last few years. He reconstructed that to put a nice little cable that runs all the way around. We hooked all the cars on it, and of course we do have the little quad car that pulled over a speeder. He's got his lights flashing. We've got a little tree over there, and the kids can press a button and the tree starts raising up. It gets all the way to the top, and there's E.T. And then the little kids that look up there says, "What's that?" They don't know what E.T. is because they're too young. You go over and press another button, you'll see a mountain climber go up, comes back down again, press another button, you go around to the firehouse. We have a burning building right next to the firehouse. Press the button, you can see the little man come down the fire pole, and you see the fire truck come out and go right over to the fire and stay there for a while until the house burns down, and then we press the button and he goes back into the fire hall, and you watch the little guy go up the pole, which isn't easy to do when you go back up the fire pole. But that's a little fun stuff that we have, and we enjoy those types of things.
One of my favorite parts of the layout is the carnival. Several of our club members made little parts that go on there, shooting galleries, etc. And I think that's very interesting. And I think the parade, I love the parade. That took years to build. I love the plane that takes off. I think that's just grand. Really, there are so many things that are so interesting. It's hard to actually pick a thing that is the best. Sometimes I ask the children that. I say, "What do you like?" And they like the Great Train Wreck of 1907. They'll come back 2 or 3 times just to see it, and they'll say, "Tell us that story again. Tell us that story about how that went together." I like the fact that we have a lot of historical old photos from our society here in town, and we've been able to incorporate those into the layout. I like the fact that this is a teaching tool as well as a train layout. This is our hobos display here at the Flat Rock Model Train Depot and Museum. This is a real hobo jacket. This man, Al Gale, hoboed out of Flint, Michigan, and all his life he did odd jobs all over the United States, and he traveled on trains by jumping on them and being a hobo. And this is a picture of Hobo Junction, which shows signals that hobos put on trees so that when more hobos came to the area, if they were not able to read or write, they would know where to go in that particular town. This is our Lincoln Funeral Train exhibit. The detail on it is wonderful. Very, very many intricate little parts. It was donated to our club by Lionel, and it was an exact replica of the train in 1865 that carried Lincoln from Washington, D.C. to Springfield, Illinois after the assassination. It made several stops along the way and ended up in Springfield. This is an original headlamp produced here in Flat Rock at the Ford headlamp plant, and it was attached to each side of the Model T cars. Henry Ford built a plant here in order to produce power, and he had the dam constructed for that so that we could produce these headlamps right here in Flat Rock. That Ford headlamp plant was very modern, very up-to-date, and we have a model of it with all the little parts that they needed to make the headlamps all inside that little factory. Here we have a display of Henry Ford and the importance that he had in the development of Flat Rock and the development of the DT&I. He bought the DT&I in 1920 and sold it in 1929. During that time, he coordinated the efforts of the railroad, making the tracks synchronized so that engines could go on all kinds of different tracks. Everything was coordinated. In 1929, he sold the DT&I for $16 million, and he had originally purchased it for $5 million. So he made a very good profit there, and he did a lot for railroading and a lot for our city. This is our switch stop. It was put along the railroad tracks so that people would have these locks put on it, and they would not be able to change the course of the trains on the various tracks. Behind me is a collection of switch locks which went on these pieces. This is our layout from 2009 to 2012. Here you can see not too much is going on, but we're adding and adding and adding as we go along. And these were some of the original displays on the top of our layout. It looks quite a bit more complicated now than it did here, but as you can see, we started with very simple beginnings and we went to what we have nowadays.
This is all BS before Steve. These trains have either been donated by people that have come in here and been quite impressed with everything that we have. Plus, we have some of our own club trains in here so that we can take these off, put them on the layout as required. And as you go around, if you look up, we put some of our older trains. There's pre-war trains way at the top. And as you walk around, you'll see those displays all over. Why get into the hobby and what does it offer to anybody that's in the hobby? And it's not just trains running in circles. I mean, you get people that get into electronics that love it. You get people that go like scenery, art people, and you get people that like photography. So you can cross about 5 different lines. So that type of thing, that's what has intrigued me through the years. Now, going forward, I would think the thing that's helping the hobby right now is Lionel's, Thomas the Tank, and the Polar Express is probably the biggest draw of anything. Of course, you got it around Christmas time, and you hope that when you get the kids get the trains, that interest is built and they continue going forward that way.
I think it's the movement that they really, really are impressed with. And people, of course, they haven't seen underneath it, which is a myriad of wire. And that the fact that it all moves, everything moves sort of by magic. You know, you don't see what's causing the movement. I think people are interested in that.
We're hoping that we can pass this along to them so that the next generation will pick up on it, because you go to the train shows and it's all those gray-haired guys running around there. We need to get more young people in here. So I'm hoping that the electronic end of it will still keep them pulling in. Lionel's doing what they can to try to grab them, and I hope it continues going that way.
The future of the hobby is like, I agree with Steve. You can cover 5-6 lines that are coming up. The electronics. When I got started here, Leon put me in back of a workbench and said, here, this train doesn't work, fix it. And I just said, okay, so I ripped it all apart, and by the time I got done, it was back together. And that's kind of how I got started. So that's electronical, mechanical, art people. If you look around these walls, there are dedicated sections to Henry Ford, Lincoln, the way we got started. It's all in how that everything in your presentation of artwork, presentation of this, presentation of that, and actually, I'm very proud of this place.
We're located at 28700 Arsenal Road, Flat Rock. So do come and see us. We welcome everybody to our depot and to our layout. We're very proud of it, and all the guys have worked so hard to make it as nice as it is.
The Southshore line is one of the last electric-powered interurbans still operating in the United States. Power to run the trains comes from overhead wires. The Southshore interurban goes every day from South Bend, Indiana to Chicago, Illinois, with stops in between. Michigan City, Indiana is one of the cities that the Southshore passes through. The Southshore yards are on Carroll Avenue, and this is where the coach cars and engines get serviced, which includes keeping the shiny aluminum cars fresh and sparkling. Ever pull up to a stoplight and have a big electroliner pull up next to you? Well, if you live in Michigan City, that's a common occurrence because the track runs right down the middle of the street and stops for red lights just like cars do. These folks are waiting to board a Southshore train heading for Millennium Station in Chicago. Let's join them. The trip from Michigan City to Chicago takes about 2 hours, but they are working to create new express lanes that will cut the time to Chicago just over an hour. That will be good news to many Hoosiers who depend on the South Shore every day to take them to work and bring them back home after work. Well, it was a fun trip to Chicago. Time to head home so I can practice my guitar. Matt Kipler had a problem. There was only room for one 4x8 table in his basement, but he wanted two. So he came up with a bright idea to expand vertically, creating 64 feet out of 32, without expanding his base.
The layout is on two 4x8 sheets. It came about because I didn't have a lot of room in my basement, and I wanted two, so I figured out a way to do that. Came up with the top layout and the bottom layout.
His friend John helped Matt build the layout for months. So I had to ask, did you guys argue?
Yeah, we get in arguments, yeah. Yeah, we've gotten some arguments about it, but we figured it out. The top level, I had so many older vehicles, and I liked the 30s, so I built a 30s theme with streamlined steam engines because I think they're a great engine. They look great. The passenger cars, I think, are just, everything looks so detailed on it, so that's why I like using those on the top layout. The 30s era, there's a lot of stuff going on, like the Depression. The steam engines, the puffing of the smoke, the whistle, and how they ran was
what actually makes a model train run. I have two examples here. One is a steam locomotive, one is a diesel. So why don't we take these shells off and dive right in. This is a Lionel steam locomotive. Let's start on the bottom. The electricity from the track has to get into the locomotive, and this is how it happens. This is what's known as the center rail pickup. So this rides against the top of the center rail of the Lionel track. The wheels pick up the ground, which is on the outer two rails. Now where does that electricity go? It goes right into this. This is the motor. This is the heart of the locomotive. This makes it run. There are two sides. We're going to look at the brush side. These two items here are carbon brushes. They take the electricity and transfer it onto what's known as the commutator on the armature, which spins around. This side is the gear side. Now underneath this plate is a small gear which is attached to the armature. This little knob here is the armature, and that spins around and turns that gear. This gear in turn rides against what's known as an idler gear. That rides against the gears that are molded onto the wheels that are on this side of the locomotive. This side does not have gears on it, only this. This is the other idler gear. This gear takes power from this wheel and transfers it to this wheel. So all three of these wheels actually provide the power that makes this locomotive run on the track. Now, how does the locomotive smoke? This unit right here is the smoke unit. Inside here is a resistor that heats up when the electricity passes through it. And all you do is put some smoke fluid in here. The smoke fluid does not burn. It simply causes a vapor, and that vapor puffs out, creating the illusion of smoke. Now, how does it puff? Right underneath here is a puffing unit, and there is a piston, and we can see this piston is coming down. When the train is moving down the track, there's a lever right here against the side rod. That side rod then pushes that lever forward, pushing the piston up, and comes back and lets the piston down. That pumps air through here into the smoke unit and causes the smoke to puff out. This is the tender. Now the tender has a whistle in it. Now if you notice, the tender has a motor too, just like the locomotive. But this motor spins a little fan inside this chamber. This chamber is like a pipe organ. If you notice, there's a slot here. There's also a slot over here. One is longer and one is shorter, making a deeper and a higher pitch sound. This item here is a relay. When you activate the whistle mechanism on the transformer, this relay is activated, sending power to the motor, spinning the fan around, pushing air through the chamber, and that's what makes the whistle and the tender work. Now, let's take a look at a Lionel diesel. This diesel has two motors. In fact, this diesel here was one of Lionel's most powerful diesels made in the 1950s. And you notice we also have the brush plates on both motors. We have the reverse unit here in the center, which is connected to both motors. So they work the same way as the steam locomotive. The armature will turn around. It is connected underneath the trucks inside, and there are gears on the wheels that move the locomotive forward. In the diesel, there is a diesel horn. Here's the relay, exactly like we had in our steam locomotive, but this will activate a battery which is connected, and it will make this horn work. Okay, so now you know how Lionel locomotives actually work and what makes them go down the track. Pretty interesting, huh? Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to go repair some trains.
Fall in the Midwest is a beautiful time of year. I like to play with my dog, watch windsurfers brave the cold, see the Coast Guard head out into Lake Michigan, catch a combine harvesting soybeans, and it's also a great time for train watching. We're in Chesterton, Indiana, and at this railroad crossing, you can see a freight train pass by just about every 20 minutes. There aren't any legal limits to how many cars a freight train can pull, but there are practical limits. Each railroad and some railroad unions decide their own limits and base their decisions on the length of train, siding length, restrictions, grades, how long the crossing will be blocked in the towns the freight will pass through, and the type of train. The longest train on record was an ore train that pulled 682 cars and was driven by 8 locomotives. A typical intermodal train averages 173 boxcars, and an average coal train pulls 130 cars. Artists, photographers, and videographers call the last part of the day, when the sun is slowly shrinking, the golden hour. They feel that's the best time to take pictures because everything seems to be glazed in a golden glow. That's what time it is now, the golden hour. Well, that's our show. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you again in part 3.